So there was a story that I wanted to talk about in my Urdu stream, but I didn't get a chance to do it because I think I overlooked, or sometimes I create too much work for myself and I don't even remember myself. So I'm gonna bring it up. It's a known problem, especially in England, that a lot of a lot of Muslim girls, let's just start with Pakistani origin, and I'm sure there'll be others as well. They, if they grow up in and they're born and raised in England, for some reason they've been isolated in a weird manner because they obviously go to school with other British girls and people of other cultures, and they would obviously experience other cultures as well. But for some reason, again, the indoctrination is so strong that they're given a romanticized view of their home country, Pakistan, where they've occasionally gone to. And by the age of 20, they probably would have only spent 6 or 7 months in Pakistan, all on holidays. And they've been given this romanticized view there, that, oh, in this evil West, we are busy in chasing cars and Rolexes and stressful lives, and, nobody respects their family and parents and blah, blah. But in Pakistan, the fields are green, children are playing, singing songs, show Bollywood songs. Oh, no, actually depends on the version of how much Islam you follow. So they're given this romanticized view, and for some reason, these Western girls, well, they are of this Pakistani heritage, but for some reason, they fall for it, which I just don't get it. So I thought that there's one girl who might have fallen victim to it as well. So she could come and she's spoken to us before. Her name is NK. NK, welcome to the show.
Hi, Haris. Thank you.
I thought, because I sent you a message about this, and it just occurred to me that you might be able to give a better perspective, obviously because you are born and raised of Pakistani origin in England, and you actually went through that experience. Obviously not experience the one we're going to talk about today, but could you give us a little bit of an outline of what that is that someone like, I didn't grow up in Australia, but I moved when I was 19, and when I experienced the other culture as an adult, as a young adult, so I guess that might be the key difference. But when I discovered this other culture as a young adult, I was like, nah, all the bullshit that I was sold, that was bullshit. So this is definitely much better from the human rights perspective, okay? There's more freedoms, liberties, I respect. So how come these girls who grow up go to a school and, the best friend might be, I don't know, Shelley or, Elizabeth or whatever. And then they go, okay, I'm going to go to Pakistan and I'm going to marry Muhammad Bashir, and he's gonna be my my prince of my dreams, and everything's gonna be great, and we'll make lots of babies. How does that happen? Just can you tell us a little bit about this mentality?
Yeah, so I think about this myself as well, because obviously once being born and raised in this country, and then if you've done a number of visits to Pakistan, you usually would have seen how society operates there, and it could be like vastly different from how it operates here. But I think we have to remember that just because you're by default like born and bred in the West, it doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to have independence of thought and a free mind. So usually for these girls, first of all, they come from such insular communities. So in some parts of England, in the northwest of England, in the West Midlands particularly, there are some communities where honestly it's just like you've copy pasted and transposed an area of Pakistan into the UK. And these women, essentially these young girls as well, school is literally their only touch point for being able to be themselves and kind of think independently. But the minute they walk back home and that front door shuts, it's back to that complete kind of closed off Pakistani mindset where they're constantly exposed to like Pakistani media, Pakistani, just cultural values and everything. So you would think that they'd have more of a worldly view, but sometimes just limiting that to your primary school days outside of your house, it's not enough to kind of make you have an unromanticized view of Pakistan, because you are being fed also nice elements of the culture, which you might really enjoy. And so yeah, it's we can't really assume that just because they're born and bred here that they're going to have a completely different mindset. And obviously this translates into some girls who go in with a lot more of a, vulnerable and naive mindset, and then they actually don't know what the harsh realities are in Pakistan. For example, in the recent case that we've seen of Mayra Zulfiqar, I don't think she fully understood how society operates there and how rogue it can become, for a simple thing as, a refusal or a rejection, where somebody may not warrant that same strength here in the UK to pull off something like that. But in Pakistan, I mean, it happened in Lahore in defense, a reasonably affluent area. You wouldn't think that such a casual killing would be on the cards.
So here's this girl, this is a British law graduate, has been shot and strangled at her rented home in Pakistan after telling her uncle two love rivals had been trying to force her to marry them. Mayra Zulfiqar, as you mentioned, 26, from Feltham, southwest London, was threatened and harassed by the men before her body was found at the property in Defence District of Lahore. Well, you obviously read it in detail. I didn't get to that part.
Yeah.
She moved to Defence is those of you who don't know, it is the most affluent area of Lahore. It is obviously a housing society that was created by the Pakistan Army, and hence you can tell that it is very affluent, and property is very expensive there. Her uncle Muhammad Nazir filed an incident report with police accusing two men, Zahir Jadoon and Saad Amir Butt, of being, by the way, Butt is a very common name. If you don't know, it doesn't mean the Butt. Actually, it could be that. I remember there was a cricket player. His name was Salman Butt, and this Aussie commentator. So Butt was fielding in a silly position, and he just fell down. Right? He was going for a ball, and then Aussie commentator came, "Oh, Salman Butt is down on his butt." He said it in a live commentary. But anyway. So these are the two suspects of being behind his niece's murder, according to reports. So I'm assuming, obviously, her parents are not there. She was living on her own. Mr. Nazir, who visited Miss Zulfiqar a few days before the killing, said she had complained of two friends. So those two guys were friends, threatening her with dire consequences. So she was already suspecting the poor girl that something was up. They had been competing for her hand in marriage, but she refused to marry either of them. She's like, "You get out." Mr. Nazir told police Nazir's the uncle, told police he planned to confront the pair, but at 2 a.m. on Monday he received a phone call from her father in London saying that she had been shot. Oh my God. The uncle claims that Miss Zulfiqar was killed by the men with the help of two other unidentified, and is now seeking, according to Dawn.com, which is Pakistan's major news channel. Now, the update on that, according to Guardian, is that police are searching for those two men. This is the latest update on that. It was really sad when I saw this girl. I mean, she was 26 years old, as you can see here. A young girl who would have, who knows what she would have achieved. So obviously lack of education is not an issue here. Actually, coincidentally, you were a law graduate as well. This is why I wanted to ask you that when you are there, and you said that these could be the reason. So let's put your life into perspective as well. You born and raised in London, somewhere in England.
Yeah.
So you went to UAE, got married to a Pakistani Muslim in UAE, and then we shared that story in the past. Those of you who haven't checked out, do check out. What was the title video? Story of a...
How hard is it to get divorced in Islam?
Yeah, something like that. That's the one. So, and put Hari Sultan at the end. You'll see NK's story there, which is quite harrowing, and I think she's spoken in other places as well. So that almost happened to you. Obviously not. You're alive, thankfully, but this guy you were married to had become obsessive and stalking you, and who knows? I think if you were in Pakistan, probably could have been worse. But what got you to leave your country, go to an Islamic country, and say, okay, I'll become a Muslim. I'll marry this Prince Charming, that were non-existent in England.
Yeah. To be honest, it was it stems from a massive place of innocence, I think, and being very naive, because I'd only seen kind of the expat angle of living in Dubai in the UAE. So, I mean, a lot of people in the UK dream of moving to Dubai. I hear it all the time, and I'm just like
Tax-free
dying a bit
income.
inside because I'm like, no, it's not what you think it is. But that's the dream. It's obviously tax-free. It's a tax-free haven, and it's just a work hard, play hard environment. So I was kind of like a fresh graduate. And my parents were there, and I thought, obviously, the weather in England sucks. Little things like that can be motivators, just to have a more cushy way of life and to be in a warm climate, to be closer to parents. And until you're actually involved in something where, you're not sure how unhinged or what the mindset of these boys or men you mix with can be, it's not until then that you realize how things like a woman's place and Islamic law really plays out. So you see a lot of the time when it does kind of hit like a turning point, or when you do become involved and see the situation for what it is, it normally stems from a place of rejection. You've either rejected something your parents have told you to do, but again, that can't really play out in terms of Sharia. But again, if you reject like a partner, and they're slightly unhinged, or if you completely reject all these life choices in favor of your career or something, the law comes down on you hard. And the problem is that when you turn to authority and things like that to try and safeguard you, which you'd assume was their duty of care, sorry, as well to you, you start to realize that they hold the exact same mindset and the same gender and societal codes that maybe these men hold as well, that you're integrating with. And I think that's something as well that might have been a factor in this case, because if she had kind of just befriended these two men and they had realized, okay, maybe she's our gateway to a British passport, or she's our gateway to a new life, they will latch on. It's very telling of the state that Pakistan is becoming, because people are casually taking the law into their hands, and men feeling so entitled that they can actually take away somebody's right to live, out of, again, what can just be the ego's reaction to rejection and honor and izzat and everything else that they think has been violated, or whichever way they think they've been emasculated.
Yeah, and this is why I think it came to me as a bit of a surprise, because most of what we had heard, and obviously this is why these stereotypes are bad, because they never tell the whole story. What we see that, okay, these British Pakistanis, for example, the word Mirpuri is thrown around, that these are very religiously conservative people. They were already conservative to begin with when they were in Pakistan, when they emigrated to England. And they already have a very religiously conservative upbringing. That's why they go home and they bring these imports of what we in Pakistani lingo we call these pendu ones. So like they're not very they're not higher up on the social ladder. So that's why, and I'm only saying that because in England this class system does exist. Whereas opposed to Australia or America, I mean, the class, caste, these things don't matter. But so you usually would think that, okay, so these are the ones who are doing, but surely there would be, those modern Muslims who would not. And in this particular case, it looks like she is that she doesn't belong to that stereotype. She went on her own. She was living on her own, and these guys, she obviously would have met somewhere, so she probably would have dated them. And then, and then she probably didn't like them, and she said, well, bugger off. But these guys, it's just sad that it happened. So the reason why I wanted to talk about this as well is, okay, there's one part where we know that a family plays a role, and they say, we have found your auntie's son is the prime candidate for you. So, you're going to make babies with him. He's your first cousin. Beautiful babies are going to be born. So that's one thing that we see. But then obviously there's another alternative which is quite worrying for me, because her father would have sent her, just, honey, go home, go to Pakistan for a vacation or something, and maybe if you find a guy, that's good. So, I mean, they can be victims from that demographic as well. I've seen Malij sent me a video of these two girls, Pakistani girls. They're born and raised in America. One of them is in New York. And she has tattoos and she sings songs. She sang a song "Mera Jism Meri Marzi." If she didn't mention she's Pakistani, you'd think that she's some Western woman, young girl, just like those TikTok ones. Like this, you just wouldn't know. But she told me that even she was talking about getting a brown husband, and that's where we should go. And it's like, why? I mean, sure enough. I mean, there's one thing about being, there's a type that you're only attracted to certain types of people. So I can understand that. But even that, there's a diversity in that as well. So why? I just don't get it even now. This is the first time I thought about it. It just happened coincidentally that Mali mentioned me those two YouTube girls, and this thing happened. It's like, oh, so it's not just the conservativeness, family pressure. It's just the indoctrination where they're raised that way, where they're just thinking that way. So even modern girls, they all are educated, but these progressive thinking girls, even they are looking to have that. What do you have to say on that?
Yeah, I mean, it's surprising, honestly. Even when even my grandma, for example, she tries to get people together with like arranged marriages and things, which is like that whole setup. But it's incredible to see that even to like in this day and age, for example, some of these discussions they're having on the phone, they get that this is how I'm trying to explain how insular the community is, because everybody holds the exact same belief. They kind of just in terms of like assimilating, I don't think they have per se, because they've just kind of like stayed in their immersive bubbles within like an area. So they'll spend all day, every day on the phone, and they're just reinforcing each other's beliefs. The media they're consuming is, further reinforcing that. Then the values they're trying to pass on to their daughters, they're kind of upholding all of that. The girls bring the tea in, the girls serve the men eat first, and, cover up and all that kind of stuff. And so even when they're talking about like these proposals and things, the more close kinship you have, the more it's celebrated. For example, my background is Kakaze Patan and Yusufzai Patan. So if there's any supposed men that fall into that category, there's another level of excitement that they're from our brotherly or whatever it is, and you'd think that's we've kind of moved beyond that now, but they still hold on to these links. And then obviously like with sentiments in Pakistan and the way that Imran Khan views the world, in the sense that the world is like degenerate and divorce rates are so high and their society is polluted, a lot of British Pakistanis genuinely hold that same view. So it's like, yeah, we're fine to get, UK education, even secular education, they have a problem with, as we've seen from like the Bately Grammar School incident.
And LGBTQ. And also LGBTQ, they had protests that you can't teach a homo-friendly education.
Yeah, exactly. And this is what they're trying to do this to already like an established UK, educational setup. So if they're if they've got issues with that and they've got grievances with that, they're basically like, okay, especially for women, it's like after they get to a certain age, it's not the education or the furthering of that's a priority. It's more that this idea that you will marry a for whatever branch of Islam you follow. But for example, in my personal experience, it was like it has to be a Pakistani Sunni Muslim. That was like the criteria. Even a Shia is off limits, Ahmadi is a no-go.
But if it's a Pathan, then you'll get extra dowry, extra jahez.
It depends if they're Kakazay or not.
All right, okay, yeah, there are different ones as well. It's such an important point that you made, that these societies are so insular. We had another ex-Muslim YouTuber came to my Urdu stream the other day named Bayakin Banda. He said that during this COVID lockdowns, there was the Hasidic Jewish community in New York. They had their yeshwas, I think they're called, their religious schools equivalent of a madrasa. They were shut down because of COVID protocols or when the lockdowns happened. So within that little narrow window, they realized that those Hasidic Jews were so, they were so isolated in one of the most metropolitan biggest metropolitan cities in the world, they were so isolated that they stopped going to that. And now they've got 3 months at hand. What are they doing? And there's no Yashua to go to. And then there's so many people were rebelling. So many of these teenagers were rebelling against their the Jewish bullshittery, what that is. So you're right, as you said, that within, and I've seen that too, that within these Pakistani communities, even though they're born and raised in a Western country, but they are so isolated from the outside world and outside influences that in some of these major multicultural cities, they know nothing about them. And that's why it becomes a virtue that you have to marry. This is a criteria, honey. And this is actually a favor to them. They say, okay, darling, little Ruqayya, you can pick your own husband, but it has to be Sunni. He has to be from this community. He has to be this and this and this. And from that, you have to. But in reality, when we know that if there was any freedom, so some Muslim girls would even say, "Oh no, we had freedom. I wasn't forced." Okay, but the reality is, if you're living in a free world, your options are endless. You could fall in love with with whatever, an African guy or a white guy or something. Why should they be? Or let's say even Muslims, even within that, like I know Pakistani communities, they would not. I know a person, this guy, one of the family friends that we had, his daughter fell in love with a Sudanese Muslim or something. And he said no. I was like, what, really? But he's a Muslim. At least that's the concession you got to give here. But no, they weren't willing. So yeah, you're right. I mean, these societies are so insular and so isolated, that
and I mean,
it
like,
can
even
work.
exactly. Even for example, like the next generation are a bit more progressive than the one before, and they say like you can marry anybody as long as they're Muslim. But of course, again, with our culture, it's so wonderful that if you did bring home somebody from a different race, you would just be worried for them when they were to meet people of all the generations, because you genuinely, like, there is such a level of racism as well that exists within our culture. But just to quickly touch on what you were saying about growing up here and still holding those views. I mean, the crazy thing is that every time I moved away and came back to England, I saw how much it hadn't changed, like how much the people who were still here, their mindset hadn't changed. You'll live on the same street pretty much for the whole of your life. You'll be going to the same places, you'll frequent the exact same locations, you'll hang out with the same people. And I would have been exactly like that. I probably would have thought that, it's best to stick to my roots and marry somebody from there, or at least somebody from here, but who has very, like, strong Pakistani ties or whatever. It was only by literally going away, traveling, seeing the world, experiencing other cultures, talking to people, realizing there's so much more out there, that has made me think otherwise. Because my own family that's never left England, has they think the exact same today as they did 20 years ago. Whereas, even Muhammad Ali said, if you still think the way you did when you're 40 at 20, there's a problem, mate.
Yeah. So, yeah, it's strange, and I think this is why I've seen that even with the holiday that you talk, my uncles that I know that who've lived practically now, they've lived their entire lives in these Western countries. The only holiday they would get, they would go back to Pakistan. So technically, that's the only two cultures that they've seen. But even they haven't even seen the Western culture, because yes, they do work with little Johnny at work, but they've never gone out with Johnny. They've never attended a private function of John and his wife Melissa or something. They just don't know anything about their culture, and that's
and the
why
tendency is to always go to Islamic country as well to holiday. I've noticed that they really tend.
At least they've gone. At least they've moved up a little bit. No, some of my uncles, no. 20 years every year they go to Pakistan. That's like, and they say, I've been to Singapore, because there was a connecting flight there.
And Hajj, Saudi Arabia and Pakistan are like the highlights, bucket list.
Yeah, but Saudi Arabia is also just once in their lifetime, because they're okay, I've done a Hajj now. But yeah, that's just it's just sad, and you're right. This is the reason why they just never grow out of it. I mean, even after becoming an atheist, like so many prejudices and stereotypes go away when you actually go to Italy. And you meet Tony on the street. This is the best pizza. When you see that one, yeah, that's when you go. And even then, I realized when I went to Italy, I was like, hang on, Italian food is different to what we eat, even from Italian restaurants in Australia, because they have westernized it a little bit. The pizza's changed a little bit, the pasta's changed a little bit. But when you go to Italy, so all these little things, they add up when you travel. And I always say to people that, okay, education, we have PhDs and coming out of Punjab University in Pakistan, that they are still as dogmatic as, a little madrasa boy. What's the reason? So education might not be everything, but education is not just a textbook education, the actual education when you go and travel other cultures. When you look popular culture, for example, the cosmology documentaries or biology documentaries and traveling, these three things I think are the ones that actually really expand your horizon.
Honestly, if you do a Google search of women who have been shot in Pakistan, it's terrible. Like, it fills the whole first page. It's just.
I think there was
and if you are from here,
there was one more last year. There was one more last year. I think it was. Now that was the client that fit the mold that I was talking about earlier. That. Like they were from conservative family. The girl was brought to Pakistan, and then she was killed there by her parents because she refused to marry or something. And then the British Home Affairs was forcing Pakistan to bring, return the parents to Britain or something, so they could try them there. But they were not going back to Britain because that's another thing where they say, okay, we've lived our life in Britain, we've enjoyed the good, good Western life standard, but now kids are grown up, so we gotta have, now we can, in retirement, we can live in Pakistan on a charpai, surrounded by all the chaudhries, in the village, and become a chaudhry. So, yeah, that's just sad. Yeah, that's very sad. Well, thank you very much for coming and sharing your time. And I know I had to wake you up early, but it's very useful, your insight on that, and you're very articulate and well spoken. I think you're very engaging. I've watched your interview as well on British ex-Muslims or ex-Muslims UK.
Yeah, so thank you so much, Harris. It was worth waking up for. I think it was a very productive conversation. I'm glad this is actually a massive issue even in the UK itself. So I'm really appreciative that we got to talk about it.
Okay, thank you very much, NK. Thank you for coming.
Thank you so much. Bye.
Ciao. Bye. To help me produce more videos like these, support me on Patreon or PayPal.